Hello and welcome to the quick starter of the Rui Lopez. Today we're going to take a look at what we're having in the course, first against the exchange variation and also against the normal Rui Lopez. So we are starting with e4, e5. White is playing with the king's pawn, advancing to the center. We are replying the same way with e5. Knight f3, targeting our pawn on e5. Then we're replying with knight c6, defending the pawn. And here bishop b5 is highlighting the Rui Lopez opening. We're going for the a6, challenging the bishop and asking the question, where does it want to go, or maybe it wants to take our knight. So here, if bishop takes on c6, we're going to get the exchange variation. After pawn takes on c6 castle, we're going to play a pretty rare line with this with the queen d6. Okay, maybe queen d6 is not so rare, but the other lines are going to be rare, so you'll find out later. And in case of bishop a5, we're going for the so-called cozy defense, but here differed because it's actually not an official name. A cozy defense is played after bishop b5 immediately with knight g7, but here we're going with a6, bishop a4, and knight g7. Recently, this opening is becoming is getting fresh and more played, and yeah, very interesting as a black's choice against Rui Lopez. We're going to look at many moves. For example, bishop b3 could be played, knight c3, c3, d4, and short castle. So let's begin. First, we're going to start with the exchange variation e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6. So yeah, so Rui Lopez, first of all, just talking maybe a little bit about Rui Lopez generally. So the main idea is that white doesn't want to play this Italian lines, but of course there is a risk after Rui Lopez that black is going to go for, let's say, Berlin or Marshall, which are a little bit unpleasant. But white is taking the risk, and we are not going for them. We're going for this quosio. So a6 and bishop takes on c6, basically immediately eliminating the knight and putting pressure on the e5 pawn. Of course, the pawn is actually not hanging on e5. That's important to know. It's the first trick that after queen d4, we are tricked our opponent. If knight comes to g4, we take on e4, knight e3, bishop e6, and we are just getting enormous lead in the development and very active pieces and already clear advantage. And if white is going for knight f3, we're taking the pawn again, queen e2, and after trade, knight e7, and we're getting an interesting endgame. But after rook e1, f6, we are just we can see that we have a bishop pair advantage. We will place our king on f7, and yeah, again, we're going to have some active positions because the center is completely open, and two bishops love open center. So, all right. So again, we're going to the exchange variation. So now, of course, white is not blundering the queen d4, but there are a few moves which white can play. Let's say white is going for d4 immediately. It's interesting choice because then there would be some issues for white, since in some lines we would take on d1 and king would be a bit misplaced and will not be able to castle. So for example, e d5. So here, if knight d4, we play c5 and we will take the queen on d1, getting this kind of endgames. Pretty much often in this line we can get this kind of like Berlin endgame, but we can call it an advanced endgame because here king is not on d8 and king can long castle, so it's definitely a slight advantage there, and we have a bishop pair, so we're just having a good position. And okay, we're going to talk about the setups a bit later. Castle. Here, queen d6. Okay, not the most natural way to protect the pawn, but it's a very interesting move. So the main lines are different in the position. Okay, f6 is possible, and bishop e6. But okay, in this line we go for queen d6. Now the point is that we don't know yet where the bishop is going to develop. We would like to develop it, and for example, on d7 or g4 or e6 in some lines, but also to long castle as fast as possible to stop d4. If white is still going for d4, we're taking, and actually it's pretty funny that, okay, now bishop d4, here important we go bishop d7. We can immediately like continue the development, and our bishop is behind the pawn. After e5, we have already queen g6, and we're just having better positions. And after long castle, bishop c5, we are already we are already better. So knight c3, continuing development now. Castle, bishop e3, and knight h6. We are now actually supporting the f5 break, challenging the pawn on e4. So f3 is played, and now f5 is being fully executed, and basically a great position and chances for black. I would not say black is much better or something like this, but definitely big chances for a fight. Queen d4, and actually it's very interesting that here, after queen takes, knight takes, we transpose to the same position we were discussing, this endgame, but down the tempo. And it's pretty interesting that actually it's working out still, because there is nothing concrete, there is nothing what white could use out of this tempo. We play bishop d7. So now knight c3, white is continuing development after castle, bishop e3. We're bringing rook to e8. That's going to be our usual setup, bringing the rook to e8. We can place the knight to g6, play f6. The other setup, which we might have in some lines, is playing g6, bishop g7, and push for the f5. That could be another idea. So here rook f2 e1, now knight e7, we are following our ideas. Rook 8 comes to d1. So the time in this kind of endgame doesn't really matter so much, because position is pretty static, and it's kind of a strategic battle currently. So f3, now h5, we are getting more space on the king side. The ideas which we could go for could be the playing a5, b6, bringing the king to the b7 square, slowly expanding on the queen side, meanwhile putting pressure on the pawn on e4, not getting any expansion in the center. All right. So now we're going to look at the main line of the, main move actually against the queen d6. It's knight a3. It's basically the main challenge of this line, what is going to happen. And here the main move is bishop e6 and b5, but we're going for another rare move, which is f6. We're allowing knight to come to e4, but of course we are supporting the pawn on e5. So in case c3 is played, that will allow just queen d3. It's actually a very typical idea in case white is going for c3. We have this queen d3 move, which is stopping d4 for a few moves. So white will still need some time to get rid of our queen, and then only go for d4. So with that, we're going to win some time. And okay, white has an endgame. White has a center in this endgame, very strong, but actually they're not so strong because we can put pressure on it immediately, and at some moment we can break with c5 or f5, so it's not going to be so easy to hold those pawns. They're rather the hanging pawns, I would call them. Knight c4, pretty much the most human move, attacking our queen, and here comes our rare move, queen e7. Actually here queen e6 is the main move, but we're going for queen e7. Very interesting idea. So we're getting in more risky positions, because we're kind of giving a free move for white. But our idea is to play bishop e6 with a tempo attacking the knight. So for example, if white goes b3, it's just too slow. So now bishop e6 is a move, bishop a3, now attacking our queen. We're moving away. In case of c5, there is a big problem. After c3, the d4 is coming using the spin, so we cannot really do this. And after queen f7, trade on f8. Basically, we are already ready to castle. We have a nice bishop on e6. We are ready to bring out the knight also to the play, and we can start expansion on the king side, attacking white. So that's d4, also kind of the most aggressive move here. Now we go bishop e6 with a tempo. It's very important. Everything else would be bad for black. Very important to remember this move. Now knight a5, attacking our pawns on the queen side. We go for castle and defending the pawns. At the same time, bringing our rook to x-ray the queen on d1. So here a queen comes to e2, defending the knight. And now we kind of have to do something because the pawn on e5 is hanging. So we got to take the pawn on d4. Knight takes. In case of the long castle, the problem is it's not really so dangerous, but pretty much losing, because the knights of white are very, very active, because now after knight c6, pawn takes, and after knight a5, queen a6 is incoming with a huge threat of the checkmate, so we're just lost. If bishop goes back to d7, like in previous lines we had, after bishop e4, long castle, knight b3, and yeah, two knights and the queen are going to decide the situation on the queen side. So we got to take the knight. We have to trade. We have to give up our bishop pair advantage, because otherwise the 2 knights would be too dangerous. And now we can take the pawn on e4. It looks very risky, but we can do it. So the next move is already castle, long castle. So for that reason, we can grab the pawn. After bishop f4, we can take the bishop. We accept another another piece. And okay, details about this chapter. There's also the g3 move. You can find out the way how white can achieve draw in the full line. So here f3, targeting our queen. Queen d4, queen d5, attacking the queen and also attacking the knight at the same time. Rook e1. Now king f7, and it's actually a perfect square for the king. It's in the light square. There is no light squared bishop. We are ready to finish development with bishop d6 and knight comes to e7, and we're just pretty safe, and we're up a pawn, by the way, so for not much compensation. Now already we are moving into the lines of the Cosio. So white is going for bishop a4. Now we are going for knight g7. This is the main move. Normally, I mean, not main move, but main move because of the Cosio. So our main move. Knight f6 is obviously very tempting and a good square for f6. We're claiming that knight on g6 is having a better square because it defends the pawn on e5. Also, it supports the push for d5. So, but okay, again, the disadvantage of this move is that it costs 2 moves to bring the knight to g6. For that reason, we're losing time, and white could try to do something meanwhile, but we are doing good in all the lines. So now bishop b3, white is trying to target the pawn on f7. And here we go for d5 immediately. Since bishop got removed, there is no problem with d5 any longer, and d5 can be played instantly. Pawn takes, knight takes, and after castle, white wants again to put pressure on the e5 pawn. So we have to play bishop g4, immediately eliminating attack on e5 by the knight. Rook e1 putting pressure, and now, okay, again, some threats are there because knight e5, and after bishop takes on d3, and knight would take on c6, it would lose. So we have to play bishop e7, blocking all these kind of threats, and after h3, bishop h5, g4. White could try to take the pawn, but then after knight b4, we are getting full compensation because of the problematic pieces and the king, which is very much weak because of the pawns. So now we're moving into the variation. Now we're moving into the variation with d4. Pretty logical. So immediately going for the d4 move because we didn't play knight f6 attacking the pawn on e5. So now we take on d4, knight takes, we trade, and actually this exact position was in the candidates in 2024. Gukesh played with black pieces against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and here after knight c6, queen e3 was played. Okay, first let's look at queen d3. After bishop c5, we're just going to follow up with a castle, castle d6, and we're just having the ideas of later playing of f5. Of course, sometimes there are ideas of b5, but we don't really rush with it because bishop can be really good on b3. But at some moment, we can actually take the bishop on b3 with a knight. Queen e3 was played by Jan Nepomniachtchi, and here we recommend to go bishop d6. A very interesting move, and yeah, compared to the Spanish 4 knights, not so awkward because there is no pawn on e5. But here Gukesh went for the bishop e7 move. So yeah, bishop d6, now castle, castle, knight c3, and rook e8. We are putting pressure on the pawn already on e4. Already some ideas of f5 are there. So now f4. White is trying to keep more space in the center. We play b5 now, and after knight bishop b3, knight a5, going to take the bishop of the knight. So this is one of the ways how we can compensate for this space advantage in the center. In case of bishop takes c6, this is pretty much the most common move for white. Here, take on with a b pawn is possible, but after knight c3, we would be a bit under pressure. So I recommend to take with the d pawn, and we're getting into the pretty decent Berlin endgame. And yeah, after bishop e3, we go bishop e6. Now we actually have a bishop pair here, no knights. Castle. Now a5, we are improving a little bit on the queen side, pushing, advancing with the pawns. knight c3, king c8, and well, in the next move we can play for b5, bring the king, or b6 if we want, but okay, b5 looks normal. Bring the king to b7, bring the rooks out, and we have bishop pair in this endgame, so it looks pretty nice. In case of knight d2, we go king d7. We are ready to bring the rook to e8 and hide the king on c8. Obviously, we would like to try to build the pressure on the e4 pawn against the e4 pawn in this endgame, and meanwhile just expand slowly on the queen side since we have majority there. Also, moves like a5, h5 can be played to stop white's counterattack with h4, and generally we can also go for f5, breaking the pawn on breaking the center on e4, generally around equal endgame. So now again we get to the starting position of the Cosio. Here knight c3, and this is actually the move which we struggle the most in this variation, so we have to go for d6 here. Now the point is that we are defending the pawn on e5, and there is already an idea of pushing the b5 and trading the bishop on b3. So for example, if white is going immediately with d4, this is actually the second most popular move in the game, which is not really working well, because after b5, bishop comes to b3, and after knight d4, pawn takes. Here, white already cannot really take on d4, because that would just continue with c5 and c4, and this would be lost. So knight d5, but after c5, we're again threatening to trap the bishop on b3, and other than that, we just won a pawn, very important, the center pawn. d3, white is trying to be passive, but okay, it allows immediately to equalize for black, since after b5, bishop b3, knight a5, we're just going to get the bishop for the knight, and yeah, no, generally, if bishop is being taken, white should try to go for d4, and here it's not even going to be possible. We could play even for the c5, immediately stopping all kind of d4 ideas. Castle, if castle, we go knight g6. So here d4, so now white can go for d4, and the problem is with the knight g6 move is that after bishop b3, knight d4, e d4, there is a bishop d5 intermezzo. So it's not the same like previous line where queen takes and there is c5, c4. No, here bishop d5 intermezzo, and after rook b8, bishop c6, we're getting this strange position where white is already better because of the space advantage and development. And for example, if we start playing like b5, bishop b3, and knight a5, then here there is already an d4 move and king already castled, knight b3, ab, and yeah, we have issues with pawn which is hanging on e5 and the other pawn which is hanging on b5. So we cannot do these two moves. So for that reason here, almost a novelty coming was played so far only in one game, which is rook b8. This is very, very big surprise, definitely. This move was played only in one game in 2023, and yeah, basically the point is that we are removing the rook from potential attack on d5, and now already we can go for knight g6, and in case of d4, then we will have always this b5 move. So now, let's say if white goes immediately for d4, but after b5, bishop b3, again there is a streak, and white's queen cannot take on d4 because of c5. So white has to create something else, and there is queen f3, the only move, attacking the pawn on f7. So we play bishop e6, and yeah, basically we're just continuing with extra pawn and not real compensation for it from white. Rook e1, probably the most human move in this position, just waiting for knight g6, and then to play knight e5. So we go knight g6. So here again, if white would play with a d4, that's kind of a point that after b5, bishop here takes, then then here bishop d5 is not a tempo anymore, and yeah, bishop and queen cannot queen cannot take because the bishop will be trapped. So knight comes to d5. Now we have bishop e7. Knight is very, very strong on d5. Yeah, and there are already ideas of pushing for c3, d4. So now bishop e7. If white goes for c3 now, then we're castling. And basically, okay, the point is that bishop g4 would not really help nothing because, okay, there is no pawn on d4. So we play first castle. Now h3, white is stopping our bishop g4 idea. f5, we are ready to strike first the center before white push the d4. And kind of for that reason, we are having a counterattack here also on the f file. So d4, white is going immediately for it. Now we have bishop g4, immediately counterplay against the knight and the pawn on d4, and white has to react. So c3. Now we go for knight h4. We're not even caring about the pawn on d4, but we are creating a huge threat of taking on f3. And yeah, basically the points could be that later there could be an idea of bringing the queen to the game. But for now, okay, because of the bishop and bishop is holding the g5 square, it's not really possible. But definitely weakening the king's position and like, let's say, take, playing this move. So, or in some way to bring in the queen could be an idea. So it's very dangerous position for white. So now we're getting again the starting position and c3. So now we're going to discuss the c3 move. White wants to go for d4 as fast as possible, using this time which we gave them by not attacking the pawn on e4. So now we place the knight on g6, and white starts with h4. Of course, white could go here at d4 immediately. We'll discuss it a bit later. But let's say if white goes h4, the idea is to attack our knight on g6 with h5. And here, if we would play h5, we would lose time, and after d4, we already have a completely different position, including these two moves. Getting a square on c5 is enormous improvement for white, so we have to play bishop e7. This is the best move. First of all, we are attacking the pawn on h4, and secondly, we are creating a square. So even if we are not taking on h4, there could be ideas of putting the knight on h4. So if g3 is played, which is defending move, now we can already play h5. Now it is a good move because white spent two moves for this h4 idea, and we spent only one move, and we have spent one move on development. So we have a good position, and also g4 square is a weakness. So d4 now it's not the problem. Now we can go already d5, and we're just doing great because after all the pieces are being traded and simplified, the position is going to be just good. So h5, white is trying to push forward. Now we go with knight to f4. The idea is we check on d3 and check on g2 by taking the pawn. So now d4, white is trying to open up the position immediately and sacrificing a pawn. Knight g2 check, king g2. And now the problem is if knight goes to f4, there is a d5. And the point is that white is threatening to take the knight. So we have to move away knight from c6. And then e5 is an issue. White is winning back the pawn, but e5 pawn is very important pawn. So we have to go knight h4 because we're challenging the knight on f3 right now. So now d5 is not an issue any longer. And basically, in case white goes now d5, we play intermezzo, move knight f3, queen f3, and after knight a5, which is also a very important move, because if we place knight with knight on a7, it would be pretty bad. So we have to keep our knight on a5. Rook g1, and now g5 is a very, very, very complex position. Yeah, I mean, basically, even though the king's side looks like pretty damaged for black, but we could also just bring the king to h8 since these pawns are basically blocked. Yeah, the position is just closed here on the h file. And then we could even play f6 defending the pawn. So yeah, definitely interesting position. So if knight takes on e5, we take and de. So now definitely it's or a little bit worse since the pawns are weakened. Now b5, bishop b3, and castle. And okay, basically we have already many different ideas. What we want to do, we can play for a5, a4, gaining more space on the queen side. We can play d6, break in the center. We can go for f5. Okay, first remove the king to h8, then go for f5. So many ideas. And okay, definitely there could be ideas of bringing the bishop to a6, since the king of the white is pretty weak. Okay, now we're going into this position, knight g6, and now white is going for d4 immediately. Okay, we have to react, yeah, because if we're not reacting, we're just giving white the whole center. Takes, and now bishop b4. We're checking the king, and basically bishop b2 is possible, but it's not so good. We're just castling. knight c3 is the main line and option which tries to kind of punish black, but it's not so easy. So d5, we're going forward immediately and striking in the center. We're using the fact that this knight is pinned. If white goes for e5, that just allows us to play very comfortably with bishop g4. Now h3 attacking the bishop, we take on f3, bishop takes on c6 with a check intermezzo, bishop queen f3, and now short castle. Basically in the next move we are ready to strike with f6, strike in the center and just getting a great position. In case of the castle, now if we would take on c3, that would allow this a very, very unnecessary e d5 move, and because after queen d5, bishop d3, and okay, it's not like that its position is lost, but our queen wants to go to h5 square, and this bishop b3, we're going to see also later to discuss this line that there is going to be an issue always with f7, and knight would jump to g5 or e5. So that's pretty much unnecessary. So for that reason, we have to take on e4, knight g5, coming forward. Now we're castle, queen h5, attacking the pawn on h7. So now we go h6, the only move. Knight f7, we are giving back the pawn. Bishop takes c6, pawn takes, queen takes on g6, and queen d4. So now we took back the pawn, but okay, our pawn structure on the queen side is not so good. Meanwhile, we're having pressure on the c3 square, f2 square, and we have a bishop pair advantage. Yeah, I mean, white could take all the pawns, but I would say it's very comfortable position for black. Computer is saying it's equal, but to human eye, it's very comfortable. So e d5 is the main move, and here it's very important moment. So now we're going to transpose that position what we were discussing. If we take here automatically with queen to d5, which is we shouldn't do because it's not checkers, we're playing chess. So queen takes on d5. So here, castle, and after bishop c3, now white is not forced to take. White can play bishop b3, and we transpose to the same position. And now this is a huge problem because queen is under attack, and f7 also. If we go queen h5 here, bishop is going to take on f7, king f7, and knight e5, and basically we can say goodbye to our queen. In case of queen f5, which is of course like the best move possible, but after bc, the position is so much worse. The bishop cannot get developed as we wanted to g4, so the position is already pretty bad, so we cannot allow this. So bishop takes on c3. Pretty unusual, but okay, we have to include this move order, taking with a check, forcing this variation, not to allow any extra options for white, so queen d5. Now with queen e4, we can go for queen e6, d5, queen e2 takes, and b5, and we're just going to save our knight from c6 and getting into the endgame, so no real issues. Castle, and here we are going to look at the interesting line. So if white is playing h3 in this position, that is going to immediately stop the very annoying bishop b3 by playing knight a5. So there is no bishop b3. We're controlling the light squares, and after we push the bishop away from a4, we are threatening to trade this bishop. That's actually the main idea which we're following right now. We want to trade the light squared bishop. Once we trade light squared bishop, we're getting already, pretty comfortable, equal, or maybe slightly better position. So bishop b3 immediately has to be tried, so challenging our queen. Of course, as we were speaking about it, queen in h5 is a perfect square. Now f7 is defended by the rook, so nothing is happening. And bishop a3 is actually a very interesting move because it feels like, oh, white is attacking our rook, we have to move the rook, and then there is going to be a problem with f7. But of course, we don't have to remove the rook, because if we do it after knight e5, there is a big problem, right? Queen d1 and then take on f7, and after king h8, knight takes. Okay, we're just going to have a very bad and completely lost endgame. So bishop g4 is very important move, super strong, because now we allow take, and after take, knight h4. We don't care about the rook, we care about the knight on f3. So now bishop takes on f7, and this move has to be played not to get into completely lost position on the king side, because many threats were already there, like to take with the bishop and checkmate. So queen f7, we take, knight g5, threatening our queen. We're trading the queens, and in this endgame, we're getting endgame where we're slightly better. I mean, basically we can see we have 2 knights. White has rook and 2 pawns. No, actually rook and 1 pawn. And we're just fighting for a win in this endgame. Definitely we have chances. So now the next position against c3, knight g6. So here, in case, let's say white castles, then it's just going to transpose to the other move order quick starter, first with castle. So now let's say what happens again, d4, d4, cd against bishop b4, bishop d2. A rare line, but a bit tricky. Some of the grandmasters playing like Swidler and Wesley So. So here the point is that if we take on d2, we're going to help white to long castle because we're just bringing one step closer queen to d2. So that's why we just castle. We don't care because our knight and our bishop is actually defended. In case of d5, then of course we have to take, and after b5, bishop goes back to c2. Let's say knight c2 e5. There is a very nice square on c4 for the knight takes, and d6. Yeah, we're just going to retake. We broke the center with b5, and we're just going to retake the pawn with the bishop. Now, if bishop goes to b3, then we go for knight c5, knight e5 castle, and here a5. We are ready to go for the a4. f4. Now we go for a4, and bishop has to move, and yeah, again, okay, the knight can come to c4, and we just in time to avoid this position. But of course we can 1 second. Yeah, so this was this. All right, now we look what bishop takes before, knight before, queen d2, and now queen e7. The main point is that we are putting pressure on the e4 pawn, and we are ready to move forward with the pawn of d5. Castle would be also fine, but here we are taking on d2, since now white is not castling long. In case of knight bd2, we have already d5, and we are breaking the center, similar to the main line. And in case of queen takes d2, d5 again, and now we're threatening to go with the bishop to g4. So the most important, we were in time to go for the d5. In case pawn takes on d5, now we don't want to take with the queen, since after take of the queen, we're allowing knight c3 tempo. So go back with a knight to e7 and going to retake on d5 with the knight. White is going to have an isolated pawn. In case of bishop c6, pawn takes, and e5. White is trying to spoil our pawn structure and create some nice pawn on e5. The problem is that it's going to be faced by f6 immediately, while we will open the f file, and potentially we will have some target squares on it, like knight on f3 or pawn on f2. So queen c3, and now knight f4. Basically, now we are already creating some threat against the king, and we're just in excellent shape, because after queen takes on c6, we go bishop d7, queen c5, and after bishop b5, we're attacking the rook, and it's actually already losing, because if rook goes to d1, we're going to take the knight and spoil the pawn structure on the king side. On the other side, if rook is coming to e1 or c1, there's going to be a fork. So yeah, the game is already losing for white. So now we're going into the castle, the main line. So after castle, we go knight g6. Again, here the normal move kind of would be g6, which is more known. So this knight g6 is something new. That's something what we wanted to make it work, and it works. So rook goes to e1. The main point is to stop the ideas of the d5, so that we have problems on the e5 square. Bishop c5 against the move like rook e1 or knight c3. This bishop c5 is very good. c3, next move is coming. Now knight a4, we're putting pressure on the knight. Now we don't want to allow this d4, so this knight h4 move is very important, and that only can be played with a knight from g6. So d3 is a bit passive move. This is the main move how it's being played. Okay, d4 is also possible, but it's discussed in the other line. So d3 is played. White is trying to defend everything. So now castle, and we are already ready to go for d6 and then push for the f5. If we cannot go for d5, we push for d6, defending the pawn, and go f5. Pretty much that's it. So now we're going to the 6th move, c3. Basically, now the main point of white is that white wants to go for d4, including the castle, including the c3, but it's just too much, unfortunately, for white. For us, it's fortunate because we are ready to go with d5. It's pretty unusual since normally it's not so possible because of the pin on the king. But now knight is on d6, perfectly defending the pawn on e5, so now d5 is working pretty well. In case of d3, okay, if white is generally playing d3, it means that, well, something is very good for black. So normally white should try to take. So now here bishop e7, and we're just having a great position. If pawn takes on d5, then we take with a queen. Bishop b3, queen is being under attack, and here we play queen d3. We also have this kind of move in similar lines of exchange. I mean, not similar lines, but in the exchange variation, where we put our queen to d3. At some moment also we attack the pawn on e4. Now there is no pawn in e4. But basically we slow down white with this idea. The point is that, okay, for example, knight g5 with attack on f6 would not really work out, because after bishop e7, we're attacking the knight. And if knight takes, after rook f8, basically knight cannot get out. And after bishop takes, king f8, bishop g6, pawn takes. If queen f3 played, there is just bishop f5, and we're just keeping the piece on d3, having opened the f file, and yeah, some problems for white, and already a great position for black. So in the case of f4, then we are having bishop c5 check, king goes to h1, and bishop g4. And basically, the whole queen side is standing and not really working, while we're almost checkmating. I mean, in some move order, we can almost checkmate, like queen d3, I don't know, queen d3 or something like this already is an idea. All right, so that was knight g5. So in case of bishop c2, white is trying to kick the queen again. Now we go back, but not to the d8, obviously, but to, sorry, not to d5, but to d6. We're not allowing the repetition, and the d6 is very good square. We don't put it on d7 because we want to develop the bishop and castle. So d4, now we played bishop e6, and now we're ready to the long castle. And yeah, the line continues, of course, here, but this is the main point of this variation. So now again, we get into this position after d5 takes, queen takes. So now d4, white is immediately pushing forwards, trying to simplify, but after bishop g4, we're putting more pressure on d4 and f3. If white is playing knight with d2, defending the knight on f3, then we take on d4, queen e1, bishop e7. After knight d4, we go back with the bishop to d7, and we don't really have any issues right now. We defended on c6, everything is defended, and we are ready to finish our development with castle. Bishop b3, attacking our queen. Now we can include the bishop f3, because if we just move the queen back after h3, bishop f3, queen f3, there is just going to be a better positions because of the bishops, of the white's bishops, and also we didn't manage to break pawn structure of white. So we play bishop f3. So in order not to get bad pawn structure, white has to take on d5, bishop d1. So if bishop takes on c6, after bc, rook d1, castle, and bishop c5, we can double on the d file and put pressure on the d4. We can take and create an isolated pawn, so it's actually a very good endgame for black, although the evaluation is equal. In the case of rook d1, we just castle long, and basically we give up this pawn. But after bishop e7, ed, pawn takes, knight d4, there are kind of already some questions, and after, let's say, knight c3, there's already knight e2, and we're going to take the bishop on c1. There will be not bishop pair advantage, and yeah, basically equalizing this endgame with equal pawns, material, and opposite card bishops. So now we're getting again to this position, to the starting position, and here white has another move of d4. So that's the only way how white can go for d4 without us going d5. So we take, knight takes, and okay, here we cannot already play this this line because knight went away from the e7 square. So we go for bishop c5. Yeah, so bishop c5, we are attacking the knight. Now the question is what knight does. If knight takes on c6, we are taking with a d pawn. Okay, b pawn takes also possible, but okay. Normal, we can get the normal Berlin endgame. Queen takes, king takes, and knight d2. And now rook e8. So now our plan is to bring the king to f8. We'll build up the pressure against e4 pawn, and slowly advanced on the queen side. So that's are like the typical rules for the betting. So for example, bishop b3, king e7, king h1, and now king f8, and we were ready to expand on the queen side. So now we're getting again into this again to the variation. So take, bishop c5, and now bishop e3. So now knight c6 is a threat. So we have to react on this move. So here we take on d4, bishop takes, and queen g5, defending the bishop on c5. We're not getting passive, we're not letting the queen get out. So now there are a few moves. So for example, if knight is playing knight c3, then it's just going to cover the e2 square, but not going to cover f3. So after take, knight h4, we are threatening checkmate and also the win of the queen. So we're just winning. In case of g3, bishop d4, queen d4, c5, attacking the queen. This is another trick what we have. And here, if white is taking on g7, we just go for b5. And basically in this position, white has to find knight a3 and make position a bit more complicated, but we are winning the bishop. I mean, I would say human who didn't analyze this game at home or this position at home would not really go for this variation. So bishop c5 feels like the most natural, queen c5, and we already traded two pairs of minor pieces, and yeah. This is good. So knight c3, castle, and bishop b3, d6. So we're equalizing. Bishop to e6 is coming. The space advantage not really feeling so much for white. So yeah, definitely we have a good position. So now again we are going for this d4. We take, knight takes, bishop c5. Now c3 move. So basically, the main point is that white is preventing the trade on d4, since that if we would trade, then there is going to be a pawn which would take on d4, and that's not really good for us. So we castle bishop e3, and now knight c comes to e5. So that's kind of the main point. If we take here and pawn takes, we have another option of bringing knight to e5 and then kicking the bishop from e3 from 2 squares. So knight e5. Also, ideas of d5 and f5 are also in the position. Let's not forget about that. So knight d2, now d6. Now d5 is not really working so much. So we are opening up the bishop and creating a threat of the knight coming to g4. a3, and now queen h4. So if white is playing some weakening moves, it's creating actually a target for our position. So now bishop h3 is actually a threat. And after f4, which white going for, we have already bishop h3. And we sacrifice a piece because here after queen g5, which is a key move in the position, using the fact that the bishop is pinned. Queen e2, we take on g2, queen takes, we take on e3, knight e3, queen e3, a couple of checks, and basically we're bringing the other pieces in the position. Again, we're down a pawn down a piece, for 3 pawns, but the white's position of the king is pretty suspicious, so we can try to bring the rook into the position and try to deliver a checkmate. So that was it from the quick starter of the Ruy Lopez. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot, and I wish you a great day and see you in the next chapter.